Hi guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we will take a look at some new Malicious Complied content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
First one is titled, Landlord advertises all of our company's equipment for sale to our competitors. Best follow our eviction to the letter. I work for a leisure company, think soft play, indoor soccer, laser tag, can't be specific. Prior to lockdown, managers and the big bosses were negotiating the renewal of the lease on one of our parks. Things were going mostly smoothly, however, the landlords were difficult to contact. Then 2020's crap hit the fan. All of our sites were closed and everything was thrown into a mess. Negotiations began to slip down the priority list. Nobody thought the landlord would push an eviction for an expired lease during this period, especially with it still getting rent, despite the site's closure and the closure of every business and restaurant in the immediate area. We were wrong. A few days ago, we received a letter saying we had 7 days to leave the premises and take everything with us. We are reminded that anything left in the building after 7 days will become the landlord's property. That line is very important. Now, a lot of construction goes into installing our equipment into a new building, which makes emptying one even harder. At a lockdown, with no staff and most businesses shut, it meant that saving much of our assets would prove to be extremely difficult. To lose a profitable site and all of its assets is definitely a blow to our company. But here is where it gets worse. A few days into our 7-day eviction, we find out that the landlord has been advertising our park to our competitors. But he isn't offering just the building, he is offering all of our stuff pre-installed. Ready to go, just needs rebranding. The landlord has evicted us from the property in an attempt to increase rent and make a solid profit from our equipment installed because he thinks we won't be able to empty the park. We were furious. And here is where the malicious compliance came in. We were told we had 7 days to move everything we owned out of the property. So that's what we did. Local businesses from all around offered up free space to store our things. A few people came back out of lockdown, and they all spent the rest of the week removing, selling or destroying everything that was related to us. We didn't even leave light fittings. In every other site vacation we have seen, we always end up leaving thousands of dollars worth of disco lights in the ceilings because they're too hard to get. We leave most of the construction in, as well as things like the bars and kitchens that all stay intact, recognizable as what they once were, but not this building. We ripped up the flooring we installed, tore down the walls that were not part of the original structure, wooden walls to divide up the space, ripped apart our manager's offices, and removed all artwork and lockers. The landlord now has every new deal he has been making dead in the water, a large renovation built to install new flooring, etc., or a company willing to do it themselves like we were. Lockdown has been extended another 4 weeks, so he has at least another 4 weeks without rent we were paying and won't have any potential buyers. Silver lining, the assets we got out of the site, fridges, TVs, equipment, food, tables, have all been sold, and the lack of rent and additional income has helped the business and paid staff wages. Update. Hi everyone. I'm so sorry for how long an update has taken. I was waiting for things to unfold. Here is what happened next. We handed in the keys, and it was probably the quickest handover we've ever had. The landlord clearly didn't want to make any kind of conversation, and there was definitely an elephant in the room, but he definitely said nothing about the lack of our equipment. Complications did arise when we went to get back various deposits, but he had no case to withhold the deposits from us as the building was in excellent shape. We had conducted much of the maintenance work ourselves, so the building was in a significantly better condition than we found it. We also cleaned up 99% of the rubbish and dirt from our demolition crusade, so he couldn't bill us for cleaning. A very minor bit of pressing from our legal team meant that we received everything owed back in full. The building is still vacant, and as of yet, we don't know of any potential buyers. At this moment in time, our company is still standing despite the pandemic closures and lack of business. Staff are all still employed and doing well. A huge thanks again for everyone who took the time to read this and to those who were dedicated enough to remind me for updates. Next one is titled, Unregistered Vehicles Must Be Covered. This happened years ago when I lived with my parents, but it's something I remember whenever malicious compliance comes up. My first car was an '88 Jeep Wrangler that I bought off my brother in 2003. A Wrangler is a hell of a first car for a teenager, but there was a reason I could afford it. Neither my brother nor the previous owners had been kind. By the time I decided on a college 2 years later, the list of repairs needed was beyond what I was willing to put into it, not to mention parking fees. I decided I wouldn't be taking it with me. But it was a sweet ride, 4.0/5-speed out of a 91. And no one was ready to part with it, so my dad decided to park it on the side of the house for the time being. With the repairs not yet addressed, the Jeep was not getting driven, and a few months later we let the registration lapse. The very next day we received an ordinance violation notice from the township. One of our neighbors had taken note of our tag and was waiting for the day they could report it. We had one retired neighbor that we didn't get along with, didn't hate the guy, but he had a lot of petty complaints, so we were pretty sure it was him. Well, we were upset, but my dad was ready to move a car out of the garage and put the inoperable Jeep in its place to appease the neighbor and put us in compliance. That's when I took a closer look at the ordinance and realized it specified that unregistered vehicles are not to be parked next to the house uncovered. No specific type of cover required, just some cover. So we went out back and got our dirtiest tarp, slung it over the Jeep, and pinned it down with rocks. Our reasonably nice, if somewhat rusty, Jeep had been replaced by a mystery lump covered with a dirty tarp, and that was compliant. We were more annoyed that he has called the township on us than anything else. After a few weeks of smug satisfaction, we did finally sell the Jeep. I don't live there anymore, but I don't think my parents have had a complaint since. Hopefully that neighbor crosses the street and talks to them about problems now. Next one is titled, I Paid for an Hour. Not me, but it happened while I was at a trade show in Vegas to the guy in the booth next to us. This was about 15 years ago. At the time we were a small company, and because of this we only afford the cheapest booth way in the back. We referred to it affectionately as the slums. All the big players had huge booths up front, while we were in one of the last rows in a 10x10. If anyone has set a booth up at one of the big trade shows, you know the unions run them very hardcore. Any little extra you want is a cost. You can't do anything yourself. It's amazing, even at that time, what things cost. Internet power, carpet for your booth, etc. Well, the first day is all vendors and a crap show. Some people are there all day setting up. We showed up about noon, spent about 30 minutes setting up, and then went off to get a drink. We met the guy next to us who was all by himself as we were leaving. Shot the crap for a minute and then bounced. To see a trade show go from the vendor setup to a functioning show with booths and everything is a sight to see. The first day is dodging forklifts, people, and getting lost because there isn't much order yet. The next day things are cleaned up, signs are up, and everyone is ready to go. We stroll in about an hour before the start the next day. We have our coffee, sit down, and are talking about the antics we had the night before when the guy we met yesterday asks us if we want to hear a good story, and he begins. So what the unions do at the end of the day is pick up all the garbage and vacuum all the main aisles. What they don't do is clean up each individual booth. That costs extra. Our neighbor set up his booth and then noticed his 10x10 carpet was a mess. He leaves his booth in search of a vacuum cleaner and eventually tracks down a union guy and asks to borrow a vacuum cleaner. The guy says he will send someone over. Great. An hour later, a union boss shows up and says he has to pay for a minimum of an hour for someone to vacuum his booth. Our newfound friend says this is ridiculous since it should take less than a few minutes. The guy says sorry, those are the rules. Our friend is pissed, but his booth is messy, and so he agrees. Another hour goes by and a guy with a vacuum cleaner and work order shows up for him to sign. Something like $100 to get his booth vacuumed. He signs and the guy gets to work. Literally a minute or two later, and the guy is done and starts to pack up. Our friend asks him what he is doing. The guy says his work is done. My friend tells him it's not. He is paying for an hour and he will get his hour. Union guy is pissed and goes to get his boss. A little while later, the boss comes back and asks what the issue is. My friend shows him the work order. Says he is getting charged for an hour, and the guy has only spent about 2 minutes worth of work vacuuming. He wants his full hour. The boss looks at him, looks at the paperwork size, looks at the union guy, and tells him to get back to work. That guy vacuumed the carpet for an hour while our friend watched. He said it was the biggest duck you back to them, and well worth the money for the cleanest carpet at the show. To this day, it's a story I think of when I go to trade shows and see the small 10x10 booths. I still have a good chuckle. Next one is titled, Where Does This TV Belong? My neighbors, who work for the city, recently evicted or forced some people living with them to move out very suddenly. These neighbors live several houses down from me and I really don't know them that well. In their haste, they left a TV in their next-door neighbor's yard. Surely but slowly, we all watched the TV move yards. It finally ended up in my yard. So I asked this neighbor to be so kind as to take his TV back. He declined. He then told me to call the city, his department in fact, and they would take care of it. I called the city to find out about having it removed. I was told, either move it back into their yard or you can pay us to come remove it. Furthermore, if we find it in the trash can, we will fine you. So I moved it back. The next morning, there's a knock at my door. It's my neighbor. He informed me there's a new TV in his yard that isn't his. He left very angry and I assumed the TV would reappear. It did. So I called the city again and established a time to have the TV picked up from my neighbor's address. I moved the TV back the night before and went to work. That evening the TV was gone and my neighbor came by to discuss the bill the city gave him. I politely informed him that I simply took his advice and called the city. Edit, the TV wasn't new. The neighbor was asking why the new TV appeared, like he had never seen it before. Last one is titled, A Whole Landlord Yells at Us to Shut Up. So, shut up we shall. I posted a story yesterday about some malicious compliance involving one of my ex-girlfriends. While constructing my written account, it had me thinking of other times I decided to take some aggressive demands to heart, which led me to the beginning of my junior year at college. Like my sophomore year, I lived off campus with two of my fraternity brothers. Only that year's house wasn't nearly as good as the one prior, kind of a piece of crap really. The summer heading into my junior year, my friend and I took too long to find a house and had to settle with what was left. The only positive traits the house had was that the rent was cheap, was located a stone's throw away from the beach, and the landlordess seemed nice at first. So my roommates and I moved in early September and decided to start things off with a party. It wasn't too big, just some brothers, some sorority sisters, and Old Man Rivers, my neighbor, who stopped by to introduce himself. The neighborhood I lived in was on a dead end, and besides Old Man Rivers, every neighbor was either in a frat/sorority or old and had ducked off to Florida like birds due for the winter. As you can probably tell, there was a good amount of partying done that year. Living in a good neighborhood made up for the shitty house, so that was a plus. One thing to note, however, is that there was a parking ban in the town that year. No cars could be parked on the street, period. This was very inconvenient to my two roommates, and I since we could only fit 2 cars in the driveway. We did manage to fit a car on the lawn if you parked it diagonally, but it was always blocked in. All this is important for later. After spending a few days in house, we noticed that there were a lot of trinkets all over the house, not really having any purpose when 3 college dudes are harboring there for the school year. On the shelves were cheap little pots, fake flowers, figurines, knickknacks. The walls supported odd paintings, wooden signs that had your typical summertime beach sayings and all that. Was it a nice touch? Yea, if you're 60 years old and spend your time yard sealing every weekend, knowing very well how the year would be. We decided to give the landlord a call to tell her that as much as we like her crap, we'd like the space to put our own stuff up on the shelves/walls and asked if we could move it somewhere. This was obviously a lie. We knew from intuition that all the cheap stuff there would have probably been destroyed and thrown out. What costs 50 cents at Mrs. That Salted Clams yard sale would have been $50 taken off the security deposit. That's how shitty landlords work, especially when they rent to kids who don't know any better. This ended up being true when we got our security deposit back at the end of the year, but that's a story for another time. I called the landlord and let her know the deal. She sounded a bit annoyed, but told me her boyfriend, who we'll call Witch Boy, who was also considered our landlord, would come that Sunday afternoon to store everything away. Sweet, we thought. Sunday comes and it's the first NFL game of the year. Being hardcore fans, we usually had a few friends over for the game. Since there wasn't any room in the driveway, we had our friends park on the street. We didn't think much of it being Sunday and all. Time passed, along with the bong and a bunch of spliffs. Our team is doing well, but not well enough to sit back and relax. We soon hear a knock on the door. Duck. We completely forgot about Witch Boy. Great, not even a week into living here, the landlords are gonna have us by the nuts. I quickly opened the door to see not Witch Boy, but a cop. Naturally, I closed the door behind me and puckered my balloon, not as hard as I could to not crap myself. I asked the kind officer what the problem was, and he basically said nothing much. We just needed to move the cars off the street. He also told us we can park at the beach if you have friends over and won't have to worry about being towed for now. Great. So I tell everyone inside who parked on the road to move their cars, and that was that, until which boy pulled up. He exited his car and immediately started screaming at us. He thought that since the cop was here and a bunch of us outside, there must have been a party. It makes sense and all, but there was no need to yell at us as if we were a bunch of misbehaving, red-headed orphans. Even the cop was taken back. We calmly explained to which boy that no one is in trouble and said sorry for any inconvenience. The cop was helping us out instead of giving us tickets. That wasn't good enough. Which boy told us to get inside and shut up. So we did just that and the cop left. I wasn't going to argue with someone screaming at me, and neither did anyone else. While he was moving all of the crap into the attic, which I don't get why they didn't have us do it in the first place. We all sat down, enjoying the game and ignoring every request/interaction he made as he was sweating his fuzzy little almonds off lugging fake plants and grandma's cedar chest collection up a ladder into the 90-deg attic. We would have gladly helped him, but you know what they say, you attract more flies with sugar than autistically screeching at a bunch of people paying you to live there. Every so often we'd hear something fall and break. Was it out of frustration or an accident? We quietly giggled at the thought. In the end, we didn't say one word to which tits, and he left in a big whiny huff. Astonishingly, he never smelled any of the reefer, but we sure did after smoking a few gibbers after he left. The rest of the year proved that our landlords were indeed a-holes, but nothing gave me more satisfaction by treating a big baby like a big baby. Thanks for listening.